you want to continue on your career path. We take appointments in our office. We do resumes, interviewing tips, cover letters, how to dress. We have different employers out. So tomorrow, we have a career fair. So we have different events throughout the semester. And if you guys have any questions, myself and my team are here as well at the end of the presentation. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Heather, who's going to come up and do the presentation. Thanks, guys.
Hello, everyone. I think I'm going to have to stand behind the computer that I can navigate the PowerPoint. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Heather Venkat. I am a CDC Career Epidemiology Field Officer, and I am working as the Acting State Public Health Veterinarian at the Arizona Department of Health Services. And then my colleagues here will end up introducing ourselves at the panel. So I'll just start off with the presentation, which this is CDC careers at the state and local level. So it's by no means a comprehensive list of what you can do with the CDC, but this will give you a little snapshot of some of the things that you can do. So CDC is our federal health protection agency. It was founded in 1946 and is headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. It is part of the Department of Health and Human Services. And one of the stats that always surprises me is that there are 14,000 employees. They're not all in Atlanta, so some are in state or local positions like we are, and some are also in international positions as well as in our territories. And then one thing that's interesting is that 70% of the funding that CDC has actually helps state and local public health departments. So we couldn't do what we do at the state and local level without CDC funding. So we're going to give you a snapshot today about 4 different opportunities. It's going to be a little bit of acronym overload, but just bear with me since you'll be learning a lot of new terminologies. So I'll just go over these in order. The Epidemic Intelligence Service, or EIS, Career Epidemiology Field Officer, or CFO, Public Health Associate Program, PHAP, and then Preparedness Field Assignee, PFA. So I'll start with EIS. It is a 2-year postgraduate fellowship for health professionals. And it's basically for anyone who's interested in public health on a more broader scale. So it's modeled after traditional public health residency programs, and you get that training through hands-on assignments and mentoring. And really, it's all about applied public health experience. So a lot of times, you go through your classes and you say, I'm never going to use this ever again. And you might. The nice thing about EIS is that it helps you apply what you've learned in the classroom. So those who are eligible to apply for EIS are physicians with at least 1 year of clinical training, PhDs with a background in public health or one of its disciplines. So I did do EIS, and now I'm in the CFO program. When I did EIS, there were a couple anthropologists actually in my class. It's called a class, even though it's a postgraduate fellowship. But so in my fellowship, there were 2 anthropologists. There was a nurse. There were a few entomologists. So the PhD specialty, most have it in epidemiology or some other public health discipline, but there's a wide range of what you could do. And then veterinarians, as well as other health professionals. And so EIS is kind of modeled off of the CDC mission, where it involves both domestic and international service. So they provide epi assistance, prevent and control disease and injury, promote health, build capacity, and then also support the Emergency Operations Center. So this is just a picture of from the Ebola response. And these are some examples of international responses as well as emergency operations center events that the CDC EIS officers have been able to be involved in over the years. And so most of them are infectious disease related, but as you can see, not all of them are. There's Hurricane Katrina, the Haiti earthquake, and so there's a wide range of different things that you can do and lots of opportunities. I did EIS kind of at the tail end of the Ebola response, so I didn't go to West Africa, but the 2 years prior, every EIS officer at least did something related to Ebola. And then, the last couple years, we've been really busy with Zika-related activities. So there's usually, with all of these CDC careers, there's usually sort of requirements for the programs, and it might seem a little bit rote, but they're just a standardized way to make sure that each EIS officer gets sort of a similar experience and can have a checklist of skills that they can use for their future career. So those involve investigating outbreaks, and they're not always outbreaks, so some of these are hazards. There are some EIS officers that are assigned to NIOSH, which is the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, and that is a part of CDC. And so they will do health hazard evaluations for anything and everything related to an occupational event, and it might or might not be infectious disease related. Sometimes they're chemical related in industrial plants or radiological exposures, things like that, and that counts as sort of an outbreak investigation. And then there's usually a data analysis component, and then there's also evaluating a surveillance system. And then usually, and these skills can be used for anyone throughout your career, no matter what you're going to do, writing up, your work, and then also presenting it orally. And then there's a little bit of opportunity for being able to respond to media requests. Most of the EIS officers are going to do sort of print media, and a few will get, TV or radio interviews. And then most of that learning is on-the-job experience. And this is kind of similar throughout all of the positions that we're doing. So I'm going into a lot more detail for EIS, and then a lot of it can also apply to the other professions as well. So interestingly enough, 75% of EIS officers are at headquarters in Atlanta, but then 25% are going to be in state or local positions. And so that's what I did. I did my EIS here in Arizona. So they're both great experiences, but they're two different types of experiences. So at CDC, you are usually assigned to a specific branch. So there's different divisions and different branches. So there's the Division of High Consequence Pathogens and Pathology, which is a mouthful. And within that, there's the rabies and poxvirus branch. So if an EIS officer is assigned there to that branch, they're mostly going to work on rabies and poxviruses, sometimes can help out with other things, but that's kind of it. But they sort of get that forefront of being with the subject matter experts, and if you're really interested in one particular disease or one particular group of diseases, then being at headquarters is, might be more your style. And then the thing about the state or local health departments, it's more like broad experiences. So, and for me, I like a little bit of everything. And so being at the state or local level, you can kind of tailor the experience as to what you're interested in getting to do a lot of little different things. So you don't have to care about the names, but this just gives you an idea of where EIS officers are located throughout the United States, and so they're pretty much everywhere. There are some states that might not have EIS officers because they either recruited and did not match with an EIS officer, or they did not request an EIS officer. But there's a whole process that I won't get into about how those assignments are, how that process works. And then interestingly, what's unique about Arizona is that you get state and local experience. So the EIS officer is assigned to both the Arizona Department of Health Services and Maricopa County Department of Public Health. All of the other assignments are either at a state or local health department. So Arizona is the only one that has kind of all three in a way. And so the next few slides are just some things that myself and a couple of the other EIS officers have done in Arizona these past couple years. So, here's some pictures discussing a case interview results during a measles outbreak in Pinal County. That was in 2016. And then in 2015, there was a salmonella outbreak, so I got to collect some samples for laboratory testing. We were doing an environmental assessment with our food safety inspection folks. I also got to help out. There was a pediatric Q fever case in Yavapai County, and the family owned goats, and so I got to help collect samples, and those got sent to CDC for testing. Usually USDA does those things, but they were tied up, so I got to kind of help out. So the nice thing about it is that you can kind of be prepared for a little bit of everything. Sometimes there's things that you signed up for and some things you didn't sign up for, but it's always a fun experience. And then I didn't get involved in this, but our last two EIS officers investigated a hospital outbreak of Burkholderia cepacia, and they were touring the hospital sterile processing unit, and then they were also doing a case control study there as well. So to kind of shift gears, and this is what I'm currently doing, and when we get to the panel we can talk more about it, but so another opportunity that CDC provides is the Career Epidemiology Field Officer Program. This is kind of a step up from EIS, but you don't have to do EIS to do it, but there are a lot of people who did do EIS who do it. But if you're interested in one, since EIS is only a 2-year job, it's nice to kind of look ahead and think, okay, maybe I would want to do the CFO program after that. And really, it's a similar mission, but it is more geared towards preparedness and emergency response. So, and I didn't say this earlier, I really like infectious diseases, but as an EIS officer, you can also work on chronic diseases and environmental health. So it's not just infectious diseases, but pretty much what I posted were outbreaks and things like that, but that's what excites me. So, but the CFO program is similar in a way that every CFO does something a little bit differently, and it's tailored to what the state wants. So the state health department will request a CFO, and then they're going to be assigned and do something related to public health preparedness. The program was created after the 9/11 attacks to try to increase capacity at the state and local level. So that kind of is where that stems. But just some examples of what some of the things some CFOs have done are participating in pandemic influenza planning, doing emergency response tabletop exercises and drills, and then assessing capacity for responding to emerging diseases. That's a picture of my class, or my group. So just an example of that, recently I was able to participate in a drill. I don't know if you guys are aware, but there is a nuclear power plant in Arizona, and we commonly do drills related to if there was some event happening there and there was some release of radon or some other radiological substance, what would we do? Who do we contact? How do we communicate? And so there's this whole emergency operations center that we kind of set up virtually in a way and sort of do a mock drill with that. Then afterwards, we usually kind of do a debrief, say, okay, here's lessons learned, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. And it's not always, responding to outbreaks or doing data analysis or anything like that. We do a lot of educational events and promotional things. So this past fall, we had a influenza vaccination promotion, and then just educated the public on how to prevent the flu. And then this map shows you where the CFOs are located. There's less CFOs than EIS officers, so there's a little bit less spread there, but this just kind of gives you an idea that there is fairly decent representation, and there is a CFO in the U.S. Virgin Islands, and then there's also a CFO assigned to the affiliated Pacific Islands, and so sometimes it's nice where you get to go. So the Public Health Associate Program, or PHAP, this is another opportunity for people who are interested in working for the CDC, but at the state and local level. And really that mission is to train and provide experiential learning to early career professionals who contribute to the public health workforce. And again, like the other programs, it's really all about that hands-on experience. And it's also a 2-year program, so after that, the PHAPs are qualified to apply for other public health positions at CDC and other health organizations. And so our PHAPs can kind of tell you about who they know, who have graduated from the program, and what they're doing. And so, we say kind of graduating and classes and things like that. These are jobs, these are positions, but they're usually pathways to other positions. And so there are a lot of different host site program areas that PHAPs can be involved in: chronic disease prevention and health promotion, environmental health, global migration and quarantine, immunization, injury and violence prevention, you guys can read, maternal and child health, public health preparedness, and then STDs, TB, HIV, and other communicable diseases. So I didn't miss anything there. You could literally work on whatever you're interested in. And so it's really nice to think about CDC as a career if you're interested in public health, because there's a lot of different opportunities available tailored to what you're interested in. So here's some highlights. Newspaper attention highlighting the home baked goods program, and presentations given by Lillian in Graham County. And then she also was performing a sun safety promotion as well. So those are some pictures of some things she's worked on. And then our PHAP Maddie was able to respond to an outbreak of leptospirosis in Maricopa County. With that picture has a few other team members there. And then there's a picture of her performing outreach for hepatitis A during an outbreak, and that happened in 2016 as well, so you guys might have heard about that one. And then here's some pictures. Like we said, sometimes things aren't written in, and as opportunities come up, you can get involved in them. So one of those is actually Maddie's been able to work with our tribes in Rocky Mountain spotted fever, so that's a tick-borne disease, in preventing RMSF on the tribal reservations, and that is something that's spread by dogs. So it's spread by ticks, but dogs also get it, and they're the ones that are causing the problem and getting people sick. So that's some of the work she's been able to do there, as well as co-facilitating a workshop on vector-borne diseases. So again, you kind of do some desk work, you can kind of get out into the field, you can also host some workshops, do presentations and things like that, so a little bit of everything.
And if you do it well, you might get a puppy.
Don't take one home. And this is just a quote from a former associate. They said, "PHAP's given me a wide range of applied experience in public health that is rare for a recent college graduate. I'm very appreciative for the variation built into the PHAP curriculum because it gave me exposure to a wide array of public health programs and helped me build skills that will be important to any career in public health or service in my future." So can't get any better than that, really. And then the PFA, the Preparedness Field Assignee, this is kind of similar. It's kind of analogous to how CFO is for EIS. So PFA is kind of that next step for a lot of people in the PHAP program. And that is also, again, to support state, tribal, local, and territorial capabilities for public health preparedness and response. And so their main goals are to detect, respond, and recover from these infectious disease outbreaks, natural disasters, intentional acts of terrorism, whether they be biological, chemical, nuclear, or radiological. The only thing is that PFA only hires from PHAP graduates only, but that's good to know ahead of time. And those are 3-year assignments versus the 2 years. And then after completion, you can stay in preparedness or move within CDC. So CDC does hire externally, but if you're already working for them, you're going to be more likely to be hired if there's other applicants for that same position. And then here's a map of where PFAs are located. So again, kind of scattered throughout, but a little bit more sparse than the EIS officers. But again, it kind of shows you that CDC has employees throughout the United States. And then this is just a picture of Rosa Lira. She's our other PFA at the Arizona Department of Health Services who is traveling and was unable to come today. But this is a picture of her responding to Ebola in West Africa. So there's a lot of different opportunities for people working at CDC at the state and local level. This is just a very, very brief snapshot of that. So I think, if anyone has questions, we could probably save it for the panel, unless there's anything that was confusing. But okay, yeah.
How's that? So we'll jump right into the panel here.
Okay, again.
And so how the panel will work is I have a few questions for the panelists, and then after I've asked some questions, you guys are all welcome. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them down, and we'll open the floor to you guys as well, okay? All right, ladies. So first, can you all introduce yourself and briefly describe your educational and professional background? You can start whoever wants to.
We just go down the line.
My name is Rebecca Kruk, and I'm originally from Minneapolis, Minnesota. I did my bachelor's I was pre-med in my bachelor's, so I did it in biology. Then I got really interested in public health through doing AmeriCorps. I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with the program AmeriCorps. It's a lot of people liken it to U.S.-based Peace Corps, so it's a year of service work. I did that tutoring in an urban, underserved school, and that really got me interested in public health. So from there, I did an MPH, also in Minnesota. And during my MPH, I worked at the Minnesota Department of Health in their foodborne and waterborne infectious disease area. I'm doing a lot of interviewing patients and working directly with doctors to help stop outbreaks, especially with waterborne disease in like pools and other recreational water. So from there, I joined PHAP and I moved to New York City. I worked with tuberculosis patients. Again, a lot of directly interacting with members of the public. Tuberculosis is an illness that in the United States affects people who are generally less well off, for whatever reason. A lot of them are refugees or immigrants, or if they are US born, they might be homeless or things like that. So it was a lot of outreach to that population and connecting them to services, whatever they needed, and making sure that they completed their treatment course for tuberculosis, because that's usually like 6 to 9 months. So these people often need support more than what a doctor can give them. So that was what my role was. And then I joined the Preparedness Field Assignee Program, the PFA program, moved here to Phoenix. And I'm relatively new to Phoenix. I came here in November, have yet to be here for a summer. And I'm going to be working on, kind of like Heather mentioned, a lot of planning for activities that you hope don't actually happen. So things like the nuclear power plant, preparing if there was ever a problem with that. We're also rewriting Arizona's pandemic flu plan. So if there was ever a flu epidemic that got way out of control, I'm helping to update that. So things like that, planning for big disasters. So that's a little bit about me.
So I already introduced myself, but again, Heather Venkat, and so my career progression has been a little bit different. I knew that I wanted to be a veterinarian when I was like 5 years old, but then in high school, when I heard about when the mad cow disease scare was happening in the early 2000s, it's been a long time, but I was really interested in that because that was the first thing I heard on the news that said, oh, animal health might have something to do with human health, because people stopped eating hamburgers, people were scared that they were going to get mad cow disease from eating, beef, and then I also read The Hot Zone, which talks about Ebola in that book, and then the news about mad cow disease kind of got me interested in public health. But I still, was going to school for, planning to become a veterinarian. And then when I was in undergrad, I found out that veterinarians can work in public health. You can work for USDA, FDA, CDC, you could work at state and local health departments. And so I said, all right, that's what I want to do. And so I went to the University of Illinois, actually. I'm from Chicago. And there's a professor there who told me about a dual degree program. So if you go to the University of Illinois, you could also try to get your master's in public health kind of at the same time, but then you also have to finish it after you graduate. So I did that program. While I was finishing up my MPH, I was working at a small animal clinic, and then I applied for EIS my first year. While I was finishing up my MPH, I did not get in, and then when I had my MPH, I applied again, and then I got in. And so then I moved to Arizona and did EIS for 2 years. And then once that ended, I said I love Arizona, and I loved working with the people at the state and local level, but still being able to be a CDC employee. It's kind of like the best of both worlds, and you can kind of wear one hat when you need to. So then I decided to stay. So in July, I became the CFO. And so each CFO has a different role. Not every CFO is a vet. There's maybe there's probably 4 of the 30 CFOs that are vets. And one role of a CFO is to increase the capacity at the state and local level in whatever way they need it. And Arizona did not previously have a state public health veterinarian, so they said, we want our CFO to be the state public health veterinarian. So it kind of just worked out really nicely. And so that's the role that I am doing. But they could also have had a CFO who wasn't a vet, and they could still be kind of managing the vector-borne and zoonotic disease program. So currently that's what I do, and I do the preparedness stuff, but a lot of what I do is kind of working with surveillance, especially for rabies, and making sure that we are responding appropriately and keeping our animal health partners and then also our human health partners involved. So kind of recently we've had a rabies epizootic, and in trying to get messages out to the public, we realized, hey, we need an educational event in this area where we're seeing foxes literally attacking people who are trying to hike. So doing kind of targeted messaging that way, as well as a lot of what I do is related to mosquito-borne diseases. So West Nile virus, Zika, St. Louis encephalitis virus, and then the other zoonotic diseases that are kind of unique to Arizona. We don't see a lot of cases of them, but they're kind of nasty diseases, so when we see it pop up, we want to, respond to it appropriately. So those like plague, hantavirus, tularemia, and those are also bioterrorism agents, potential bioterrorism agents as well. And so it's important that, we keep track of those and respond to those and investigate as well. So that's kind of what I do. Yeah. And how I got here.
My name is Maddie Laferlayeni, and I did my undergrad in sociology, and then I had a minor in Latin American studies. My focus was on global public health within sociology, and then I worked for a little while in higher education with international students that were learning intensive English courses. And from there, I went for my MPH. I did a global MPH. This was in Philly. So I've been interested in global public health and international aspects of health in many ways, and then came into PHAP. I'm stationed at the local health department, so Maricopa Public Health, in the Office of Epidemiology, and you saw a lot of the pictures of some of the more fun things that I've been involved with. One was doing the outreach at San Carlos Apache Reservation, doing the Rocky Mountain Spotted Fever outreach. So that picture was from last year. I did it again yesterday, which was a ton of fun. I still didn't get any puppies to bring home with me, but I really wanted to. But that has a lot to do with health equity. The San Carlos Apache Reservation tribal members and other tribal members have a higher burden of disease of this illness. They die at a much higher rate than other non-tribal members, and so that is interesting for me personally. And so that's one of the things that I'm able to do sometimes. Today, this morning, all day, I was at Basha High School in Chandler in a pod exercise. So that was kind of like with preparedness, what we're talking about, doing drills for something that you hope will never happen, but if it ever does, then you would like to be prepared for it. So if there were, for example, anthrax that was released in the community, then we would, as public health professionals, want to get the affected people medication as quickly as possible. And so that would mean open up what's called a pod, a point of dispensing. And so people would drive through and they would get their medication and then they would drive on, and we would hopefully be able to see 4 million people in 24 hours. So how you get to do that is to practice. So we did that all day today. Besides those couple of things, I also do disease investigation, where I call people on the phone and I ask them about their illnesses. So if we get a positive lab result for Salmonella or Shigella or Leptospirosis, lots of these mainly GI diseases are the diseases that I focus on, then I get to call people up and ask them about their symptoms and when they started and what they've been doing and where they ate. And it's actually a really fun part of my job. I like to talk with people about those experiences that they have, offer a lot of education and moral support as well. They're not alone. I'm developing a toolkit to be used for healthcare-associated infections for a particular organism that's a multi-drug resistant organism called CRE, and so that will then be used for different long-term care facilities across the state. And so I'm doing a little bit of research for that as far as learning best practices, what other states are doing and what CDC recommends. There was also an outbreak of canine leptospirosis. There was a picture of that here, which is a disease that affects canine leptospirosis, but it also has zoonotic potential, so humans can get sick from their dogs as well. So that was an interesting experience to be part of that response. There was a team of CDC experts that came from Atlanta for 2 weeks and helped to do a sero survey. So we went into the community to the veterinary facilities that had been in contact with these dogs that had positive results, and then did blood draws on them to see if any of those individuals had become infected from those dogs potentially. And then from that, we developed a knowledge, attitudes, and practices survey to ask ask veterinary professionals and people in boarding facilities about what they know about the disease, what they do in general to protect themselves and their staff. And so I've been analyzing the results of that, and I've been with my colleagues been working up a manuscript to see if we could potentially get that published. So I've been very busy the last year and a half, and I can't believe that it's coming to a close, but those are some of the things that I've been doing and where I've come from.
Cool. My name is Lillian Fu. I am also a PHAP like Maddie. I got my bachelor's in neuroscience and political science. I didn't really know what I wanted to study. When I first went into college, I wanted to be an occupational therapist, which is a person who helps people learn how to do acts of daily living, so like eating, showering, getting dressed, stuff like that. And like my big passion is brain injury. It's something I really care deeply about. So that was where I wanted to go. And then my junior year, I kind of found out about public health, decided I wanted to go into public health. And one really cool thing about PHAP is that it takes anybody from any field. So I was like, I want to do public health. This is a program that will train me to do public health, and I have no other options. So I went all in, became a PHAP. And so in PHAP, I have been stationed at the Arizona Department of Health Services, which is the state health department. I work in food safety and environmental services. My position's a little bit different than these people in the sense that like I don't really go out in the field very much. My team is people who are sanitarians, so they are people who have taken a very difficult test to be able to do health inspections. And they focus mostly on behavioral health facilities and prisons. And so I am not trained to do that, so I'm kind of do the behind the scenes work. Mostly I kind of create educational materials. You saw in the pictures, I went all around the state, including Graham County, Greenlee, Maricopa, Pima. I went all over telling people about some of our programs that we do. And then, for example, one of my big projects right now, I'm working on an environmental health and new website. So we kind of realized at the state that a lot of what we do is siloed out. So, there's environmental health, and then there's the lead poisoning program does lead poisoning, and then there's the food safety program does food safety, and then kind of work together to kind of integrate all of these aspects of environmental health. So kind of my big initiative as being part of this program and kind of being able to take on programs, take on projects that other people on our staff haven't had the time to do. I've been able to create a website that kind of integrates everything from lots of different programs into one resource for people, kind of having a, consumer-oriented environmental health portal. So that's been really exciting. And then another thing I forgot to say earlier, part of my, transition from being kind of just like working, being in school and wanting to become an occupational therapist to becoming public health is that I was an intern at HHS, the Department of Health and Human Services. I was in the DC office. I was working as part of the Affordable Care Act media team, which is known as Obamacare. So I worked with that team to kind of work with press and basically tracked a lot of press and worked with communications, focused on Obamacare, which obviously was a very hot topic. And it was kind of my first glimpse into what working in government was like, and I loved it. So here I am.
Awesome. Thank you, ladies. So you all kind of answered the second question, which was kind of talking about your position. So we're going to skip over that one. But what are some rewarding and challenging aspects of what you're doing now?
So I'm fairly new to my current position, but I would say during my PHAP experience in New York, one of the both rewarding and challenging things was working with people who had lots of varying needs and trying to connect them to what they needed on a case-by-case basis, and just really building up a trust with all these different patients and then also with the doctors, because I was in a kind of unique role where I wasn't the patient's medical provider, but I still had a lot of resources that I could connect them with, so building up that trust with the different patients who were going through these really stressing life events and then being sick on top of it. That was a challenge for me, but also very rewarding. Here so far, moving twice across the country has been cool. It's definitely an opportunity that a large organization like CDC can provide you with, and that has been really cool for me. Also challenging is to get to know different areas, and starting over again basically. But I think in my current position, it's going to be very rewarding to help build some new infrastructure for different disasters, hopefully, but we'll see. Yeah.
So I'll just touch briefly since I did do EIS. Really, for EIS, the only potential challenge is that when you match, during that process, you kind of rank your top 6 positions that you want to match with. And some people get their first choice and some people get their 6th choice. I think about 86% of my class got within their top 3. However, that happens in April, and then you start EIS. EIS technically starts in July, but everyone does a month training in Atlanta, and then in August you kind of go to where you're assigned. But up until April, you don't really know where you're going to be in August, and that can be a little bit nerve-wracking. Thankfully, I had Arizona first, and so I matched with them, so I got them, so I was really happy, but some of my colleagues might have been a little bit disappointed. But I think the thing is, don't rank any position you wouldn't be happy to go to, and then you can't be upset. So, so that's all I'll say about EIS. For being a CFO, I think one of the really rewarding things, and I guess this kind of ties into EIS too, especially since it's kind of more recent transition for me. But I think kind of overall in public health, what I really like about what I get to do every day is that, you see that impact and you see that change that you're making. I guess the challenging thing is sometimes it can take some time. So a lot of times if you're putting a new algorithm out there or a protocol into place, or you're establishing a new connection with some other health agency or tribe or something like that, it might take some time before you actually see, those changes manifest. But one of the things that's really rewarding for me is that on that broader scale, you know that you're making a difference. Sometimes you don't always see it, sometimes you do, but I think it's much more satisfying to me than, just kind of, treating one animal, or, physicians will say too, just like treating one patient can be rewarding in the short term, but treating populations is a lot more gratifying, and you know that you're really making a difference on that more kind of national or even sometimes global scale. Kind of in the day-to-day, I think one thing that people need to think about is that you are working for, we are employed by CDC, but we're also working at at another location in another department. So sometimes it can get kind of busy because you sort of have CDC, sometimes CDC administrative things to do, and then sometimes, state or local health department things to do. So sometimes that can be a challenge, but one of the things that I like is to keep busy. I don't like to be overwhelmed, but I like to keep busy, and I think in this role, I get to do a lot, and that kind of scratches that itch. So that's for me.
Before I forget, I wanted to mention about PHAP. I think it's important to note that you don't have to have a higher education. You don't have to master's degree or anything further. You have to have a bachelor's degree and an interest in public health. And like Lillian mentioned earlier, your bachelor's degree does not have to be in a public health related field. It can be in anything. So I wanted to make sure to mention that before I forgot. And I also wanted to mention, if that's something that is interesting to you, the application we start in October. The application for October ends in the first week of January. So if you wanted to start this next October, you're already 3 months late for the application. So just something to keep in mind, that's also a challenge I maybe would say about working for the federal government, is that the bureaucratic process, it just takes a long time because it's a powerful machine, but it's slow moving. So it's kind of like a steamship, right? It takes a while to get it in motion, but once it's in motion, it's hard to stop, right? So those are just some things I wanted to mention. I think that I would also echo some of Heather's statements that where as a PHAP we didn't have a, well, we did. We ranked, you ranked preferences. It wasn't quite as granular as from the EIS perspective, where you meet an actual potential employer and you say, okay, this is the individual that I'd like to work under. These are the projects that I would like to do. With PHAP, it's a little bit more loosey-goosey, where you say, this, I want to be in region 1, which is, California, Hawaii, Arizona, Oregon, something like, it's a big chunk of the United States with a lot of variety within it. And so you rank those regions, and then they match you to your region. When I got the letter that I was matched and I got the job, I was really surprised that Phoenix was on the list. And I said, and then I was even more surprised to find out that Phoenix was in my first picked region. So I was thinking,
that's how I felt too.
Yeah. So I had kind of no idea that I was going to come to Phoenix. And so that was then, but a reward also to come to a place that you might not necessarily would have chosen for yourself, or that I would have for myself. But, that's part of the journey. And so to kind of lean into those things that might be a little bit less comfortable, or that you think that would be rewarding, but then you make the best of it. And I guess the only other thing that I would want to mention would just say that one of the rewards that I've had has been to be surrounded by incredibly passionate, dedicated, intelligent, amazing individuals. And I feel like the folks that work both at the CDC level that I've been in contact with, and also at the local health department, they've just been incredibly inspiring. And then my colleagues as well, I'm also inspired by them. So it's neat to be around like-minded individuals that are passionate about public health, and it's makes me feel all warm and fuzzy. Yeah.
All right. So I guess I'll start with the challenging part. Kind of like they mentioned, I think you'll probably hear this a lot with any person who's kind of sent out to the state or local levels, but definitely balancing that workload between your official boss, the CDC, and then your local host site duties. But kind of the really cool thing about having these two levels of relationships is that you get to learn a lot about, get to meet a lot of people, and you get to learn a lot about different processes that your coworkers might not know about, which is really cool. And I think specifically with the PHAP program, like Maddie kind of mentioned, you're placed somewhere and you're just kind of in it. So my big passion, like I said before, is advocacy. I really care about brain injuries. It's like my thing. And I'm in food safety, and I didn't even know food safety was an option. I think I'm one of like 3 people out of the like 190 person class that works in food safety. And it's been awesome. I know so much about things now that I'm way meticulous about how I cook. I clean all my kitchen every night with bleach. It's great. I think also another really cool thing about PHAP is that because they know we're recent graduates, and some of us are recent graduates from MPH, like Maddie or like me, or your bachelor's, they want to develop you as a person. It varies supervisor to supervisor, but my supervisor has allowed me to do so many things completely unrelated to food safety. So in the picture earlier, I work a lot with the Sunwise program, and so I go out with them for sun safety, kind of like outreach. And food safety doesn't do any outreach. Our program doesn't do any outreach, but with sun safety, I've been able to meet people in the community, see what they care about, stuff like that. So I think part of being, I guess, a developing person or developing career public health person, people are really good about kind of getting you to a place where you can be confident in what you know subject matter wise in your field, but also kind of get a feel for what other fields might look like. So like preparedness, like Maddie gets to do this pod thing today, and she works mostly in epidemiology. Like those are completely unrelated, but they bring it all together so that we can learn more, which is really awesome.
All right, ladies. Since we talked a lot about the different opportunities within the CDC and the different programs, we'll just go to the last question. So, what advice would you offer to students in terms of anything about how they're professional or what have you? Any advice that you would offer to them as they're developing in their professional careers?
So I just went through the job hunting process last summer, so this is all fresh in my mind. So I wrote a lot of notes about this, but I think that any experiences that you can have, whether they be volunteer or paid or through classwork, where you're connecting with people, those are never going to be wasted, because you're learning both written and oral communication skills probably. So I know it's a very broad piece of advice, but I think just keeping that in mind with any employer, whether you choose public health or not, they're going to want you to have those really tangible skills to work with other people. So that was one of the first things that came to my mind. But yeah, most of mine are about the job hunting process. So I think it's also really important to be able to convey your skills and experiences both in written form, like in a cover letter, and also in oral form during an interview. And so if you don't feel comfortable doing that, it's definitely something you can learn. Use your career office if you're a student. I did, and it super helped me. Like, they prepped me for interviews. I just practiced with a career counselor, and it was amazing. And so that is something that I would say, don't underestimate being able to portray the experiences and skills that you have, because the person that you're talking to doesn't know anything about you. And so you have to be able to tell them what you've done. And what else? Along the same line, it helps this is something I didn't really know when I first started applying to jobs, to learn as much as you can about your employer, whether that be just doing a simple Google search and looking for what projects they're working on, or knowing some keywords that are in the job posting that you can put directly onto your cover letter and your resume, so that when they do a computer search through all the different resumes they get, yours will be pulled out. That's something that nobody really told me at the beginning, so I wanted to make sure to mention that. But I guess specific to public health, I would say that the first thing that really got me interested in was a volunteer opportunity. So any sorts of like enrichment opportunities that you can have that might not necessarily be directly related to public health, you never know what kind of doors those will open for you. So yeah.
Yeah, I echo the interview thing, because I hate interviewing, and it just really helps if you can practice. And also plan ahead. There's usually standard, I know this is kind of going to the interview thing, but there's usually kind of standard questions that will come up time and again. And I think using, kind of having a little question and answer bank in your head. I mean, type out the answers, look them over beforehand, practice answering them, and then when you go into the interview, you'll feel more prepared. And then another thing is to, so kind of moving away from the interviews though, I found really helpful in my career to make connections with as many people as you can. Sometimes you might talk to that person once. You'll send them, a invite on LinkedIn. You'll connect professionally, and then maybe, a year down the line, you say, hey, I know someone who works for that agency. Or maybe a year from now, they don't work for that agency anymore. They work for a different agency. So, for example, there was an epidemiologist who worked for the Pinal County public health, he now works for WHO. And it's like, all right, I know someone who works the World Health Organization. That's awesome. And so as their careers change, you might gain more connections as well. So definitely don't, burn any bridges, because you might be able to use those connections to open up more opportunities. And also be flexible and don't be afraid to reach out to people to create those opportunities. So for my fourth year rotations for vet school, they have you do these clinical rotations and things. And I was like, I know I want to do public health. So during the weeks that I had elective blocks, I had to create my own opportunities and things to do because there weren't those formal kind of programs. So I reached out to someone. I was able to do internship at CDC for 6 weeks during my time, and then also got to work at the Center for Food Security and Public Health in Iowa. And, I wasn't getting paid for those things. So I think another thing is to just be open to not getting paid. Sometimes the experience is worth it more than the money. But if you're getting paid too, that's also nice.
I have 3 pieces of advice. One, I think, both of my colleagues have mentioned it beforehand, volunteering. I think volunteering is really important for these same reasons as well, that it can help to expand your network. I think that at the same time, what's been exciting for me is that it's just a great way to incorporate work-life balance into my life. And like I think Rebecca mentioned, that you never know what doors it's going to open and how that's going to lead to other things. And it looks great on a resume as well. So I think that there are a lot of only positive things that can come from volunteering. I would recommend to get a mentor, and I think that mentors are great in many ways. They can look over your resume, they can give you professional advice, and they can also, I think it's been helpful for me to hear about somebody else's professional journey, and that's just a nice touchstone for me. And then lastly, and I think really importantly, like Heather mentioned as well about not burning bridges, I think that it's really important to never talk negatively about somebody in a professional sphere. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. They might be your potential boss someday. I think it's just good form in general. So even if it's people at the water cooler and saying, oh my goodness, did you know that blah, 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 just don't engage. That's something that I've really adopted, and because of that, I have a reputation in the office of being a kind person, a person that respects boundaries and doesn't talk badly about people. And I think that then speaks volumes to your credibility and professionalism. So
Yeah, kind of a story along the burning bridges thing. I found out recently that we hired a new sanitarian, a new inspector, and he told me last week that one of our other inspectors who he worked with for a week, like 5 years ago, didn't invite him to a party that everybody else in the department was invited to. And obviously in this case he wasn't hiring the other guy, but he very well might in like 5 years, And in his head, he's like, this guy did not invite me to this party, and he singled me out, and he's really mean. And that's not something you want to do to somebody. You don't want to make someone feel uncomfortable with who they are or not feel like part of a team. And I think that kind of thing lasts for a long time, obviously. And kind of alongside the volunteering thing, I agree. I think volunteering is super important, but obviously not everybody has the financial means to volunteer or have time where they're not working. And I think one thing to remember is that like your experiences, you're always learning something, and it's kind of important to kind of just craft your message around what you're learning or what skills you have, right? So I think, for example, like in college, I worked a lot, and I worked at a chocolate store for a long time, and you do learn skills there. I'm making truffles, and nobody, that's not necessarily applicable to another job in like public health, but learning how to work with customers who are mad at you. That's a huge thing that I've been able to use in public health, and that's something that I've learned from my time working in a chocolate store. So I think it's important to kind of leverage the skills and the experiences that you have and make them yours and kind of show them off. And I think another big thing is to initiate. I know for my team, at first my boss was kind of like, oh, Lillian, here's like inventory, just, go do something. And I did it, and then I had an idea to change our entire system, and I pitched it to her, and she was like, oh my gosh, great idea. And then I completed that project, and then from then on, she was like, this person is someone I can trust to give me input, and somebody who will go above and beyond and do what is necessary for the program to thrive. And once that's what someone thinks of you, then you can do so many more things. And I think just kind of being able to put yourself out there and you have something to offer and offer that to somebody, they'll really appreciate that, and that will get you far. And my last thing is that I think I'm not a big networker person. I'm not really good at networking events. I've been to a couple. They were terrible. I hated it. But I think that there's other ways to shine. So I think like what I've focused on and what has worked for me in the past is just working diligently at the tasks that you are given. I think that people will still recognize good work when they see it. If you're a big talker, it doesn't mean you'll always get everywhere. So like when I was interning at HHS, there was another co-intern with me, and he was very chatty. Everyone loved him, but his work just didn't show for it. And at the end of the whole experience, I was preferred to stay for the summer, and he was not. That's something that matters. I wasn't as fun as him, but I got my job done, and I did it well. And I think that's something to kind of keep in mind, that you can go far without, what everyone tells you to do, which is networking and like being super personable and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Just really quickly, I wanted to add those kind of unpaid internship things. They don't have to be long. So, yeah, like she said, sometimes you don't have a lot of time, or you also have other part-time or full-time jobs going on while you're trying to, get these other experiences or degrees and things like that. So, like, some of the things that I did were only like some of the things I only did for a week. But I had a project, and I was able to put that on my resume, or some things for only 2 weeks. So don't think that it has to be for a whole summer. You need to dedicate yourself to something. You can still learn a lot in just a few weeks. So that was just going to add on to that.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Now we'll open the questions up to anybody in the audience if you guys have anything. Any questions? Yeah. Go ahead. We'll go here and then we'll go to you.
So is it better to start within what do you guys, if you guys want to go NPH or like go straight into the CDC, what do you guys recommend? Like go into a PCAP or go get an NPH and try to go into the CDC after that? What do you guys recommend?
From my perspective, I think it just depends on your long-term career goals, and it's a little bit hard because you don't really know what they are, right away. But there's a lot of different routes that you can go. So, as you saw, like the different programs, they kind of all echo each other, and you can have great experiences with them. There might be different degree requirements with them, but, just doing your research and saying, these are the next steps past that. What might I need, to continue to be, either competitive or to continue to move forward. That's just my thing. But I know that's not really a straight answer. I don't think there's a straight answer.
PCAP has a mix of people who are straight from their bachelor's, or people who have a couple years of work experience between their bachelor's and PCAP, or people who have MPHs. Some people do their MPH part-time, like online, or in the evenings while they're doing PCAP, if you can swing it, your time and financially.
What I would recommend, I would say, if you have time, apply for grad school and apply for PHAP, if you're interested in PHAP or something else, and then you can then make a decision from the places that you're accepted.
No,
That's
good.
what I would do. And then you can see what's going to fit best for your ideas at the time, because it is such a long process, right? Also for grad school.
I think for me, as one person without an MPH or without even further higher ed here, I think that, at least for me, what's worked out so far is that I think that you shouldn't just get a master's to get a master's. I have friends who went straight to grad school, and then they had no idea what they wanted to do with their lives. I don't know what I want to go into public health, but I don't know if I want to get an MPA or MPH or whatever. So there's so many options out there within the public health field. You might want to go into law. Like there's all of these things that still fall under that same umbrella. I would say if you have the ability to, I think for me it's been beneficial to get some work experience, figure out kind of more in detail what my options are in the field, talk to other people who work in public health and what their backgrounds are. And I think I'm going to use that information to kind of decide where I'm going to go to grad school in the future, if at all. So
I think that's really sound advice. Just to tag one little thing onto that, was that I was not working in this is my first public health job, and I had the opportunity to get my MPH while I was working at a university, and so it was tuition remission, and I was thinking, this is great, how wonderful, I can do it for, it took a long time, but it was a lot less expensive. But then come to find out that I had too much education for a lot of entry-level jobs, but not enough experience for jobs that required an MPH. So I kind of put myself a little bit into a bind, but now with this, now I have some more experience, so it's good. But that's something to think about, that I think that's really sound advice.
That's good.
You had a question?
Yeah, so it seems like for the CDC, a lot of jobs, like, so like if you have goes into the field agent, so if you want to go into research, is there something sort of like that, or something similar in the way that you have that, like, onward job progression track?
I think that might be, is that the ORISE fellowship? Is that more research
I think
oriented?
so. Yeah.
I think there are some programs. There's an ORISE fellowship, which I don't remember what the specific requirements are, but it's ORISE if you want to look it up. And I think that one is a little bit more geared towards research. I guess it depends if you want to do more like laboratory work. Then there is in kind of analogous program to EIS. It's called the Laboratory Leadership Service, LLS, and that is similar to EIS, but it's all lab work. And then that can kind of be a gateway into working at CDC in their research laboratories.
yeah, and I know that the National Institutes of Health also have a pretty, I'm not quite sure what the program is, but I know a friend who is doing research at the NIH. So if you want to talk afterward, I can give you his name and you can ask him about it. But there's definitely more than just the CDC in the public health realm. So NIH is something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like a lot of the investigations that I've done, there's been someone who's kind of more like a researcher who's there. So like when we had the West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis virus outbreak, actually a couple of the CDC researchers from the Division of Vector-Borne Diseases in Fort Collins, Colorado, came to Arizona, and they did some studies looking at birds and mosquitoes. They did some trapping and testing, and then kind of took all those samples back up to the to Fort Collins, and kind of are doing their own project on the side there. So there are folks, depending on kind of what you're interested in topic area-wise, might be able to connect you to.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll go here and there.
For someone who's potentially interested in the PHAP program, I know you said that like your bachelor's is required. I'm fortunate mine will actually be in a health-related background. But what other requirements, or maybe not requirements, but what might other either experiences or qualities be good to have, or if you or not have before you consider applying?
With PHAP, you have to apply within 2 years of graduating, so that's one important thing to note. I think that one of the words that I remember a lot from our PHAP training and even beforehand is flexibility. Yeah. So flexibility is a large thing. So starting with where you're placed, the area that you're placed in. So I think that being able to, like Rebecca was saying earlier, to speak to your skill set and to be able to highlight these are the ways that I can demonstrate that I've been flexible in professional settings that will, I think, bring you far in a PHAP application experience.
Yeah, I definitely second flexibility with location, kind of with I mean, like Maddie kind of mentioned before, the process is a long process. You send in your resume and your initial application in January. I think you hear back sometime in March or April, and then you get your final in June or July, which is a long time to wait for a job. And the pool is quite large. It's a very competitive program, so it's kind of you want it, but it's also like you're putting a lot of you're waiting for a very hard to know if you'll get it program. But I think I think if you're flexible and kind of just demonstrate that this is something you care about, I think that's going to get you far.
Okay.
Anyone have a question back here?
Yes, my question was, I know that the application process was in January. Is there a different time frame, like for another state, or is there like just all in January?
Not for.
You can do it next year. Just put it on your calendar. January, apply to PHAP.
Is there like a notification on like USA Jobs or some sort like going on? Like,
It is. It's through USA Jobs, but it's
Yeah.
only open for like a week.
So typically, on USA Jobs, if you go and you select like things that you're interested in, it'll notify you when those things are posted.
Ooh, I didn't know.
Yeah, so this is where all my research on USA Jobs comes in. So if you go on USA Jobs and you find like different like industries that you're interested in, you can select those, and then you'll get updates when their positions are posted. Because she's right, there are positions on USA Jobs that'll only stay up for like a really short amount of time.
Put it on your
PHAPS is-
calendar.
Yeah, PHAPS is a week if I remember right.
Yes.
So in December, just keep it in your mind, I guess, to find out what week in January it would be. But
And there's handouts for each program on that back table if you guys want to take a flyer there to get more detailed information.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming out. I'm going to ask that the panelists stay for a couple minutes if you have any additional questions or you want to have some one-on-one conversations. Like they said, there is information in the back. If you guys are interested for the rest of the week, tomorrow we'll have the FBI out, and then on Thursday will be HUD, and then on Friday we're going to do 2 webinars, one based around how to apply for federal employment and writing a federal